Hello, and welcome to another episode of Be Your Best. So today's episode should be really, really interesting. It's about aging less and lifting more, the importance of progressive resistance training. So before we take a deep dive into this, let me introduce my co-host, Alan.
Hey, everybody. How you doing this week? We've had some really exciting shows, and today's going to be a good one. It's about exercising. That doesn't mean getting rid of ghosts out of your house, though.
A different exercise.
A different exercise, yeah. There's exercise and exorcise. Today is exercise, and mostly about resistance training.
Yeah. So this is, what do you call it? New for you. You're saying there's less stuff that you know about it, but hopefully it'll be.
I'm not big into the type of exercising I did in the past. Was when I was in high school, which might have been a year or two ago, and a lot of I played ice hockey, so it was a lot of repetitive skating up and down the rink was the exercise.
Oh, okay. Now, do we need to play our intro or?
We already did.
Oh, we did. Okay. So the first thing, like, when talking about resistance training, this is true. So I actually wrote it down, but first of all, muscle is a longevity organ, which most people don't realize. It's not about looks, but it really is more about health than people realize. And higher muscle mass and strength correlates with reduced all-cause mortality. So across the board, which most people don't realize that.
So the more
anything
in tone your muscles are?
Yeah, so all things that cause mortality, whether it's diabetes or heart disease or all this stuff, the higher your muscle mass, the less likely you're going to perish from these. So it's all-cause mortality so it's across the board. It's not like, oh, it helps with this or it helps with that. It helps with everything. And it's not only that type of stuff, but it helps just with the quality of your life. Getting up from a chair easier. Right. You're less likely to have falls. You have better insulin resistance. All these key factors that help you age better. And because it's one, a lot of people are like, oh, I want to live forever. But if the last, 50 years you're in pain and you can't even get out of your chair, do you really want to be living another 50 years? The whole point is you want, the quality of life.
Quality of life all the way through.
Yeah. So resistance training is definitely very key for that. And I think we should talk, first of all, what is progressive resistance training. So when you hear resistance training, it's kind of synonymous with
resistant to training.
Some people are resistant to exercise, but it's basically like some people think, oh, it's lifting weights and I can't really lift weights, but you could do resistance training just using your body weight, or different things. It's basically where you're using some sort of force on your muscles that cause it to, resist, and therefore
it has to push against.
Yeah, it pushes against. So even if you do a push-up, that's resistance training. You're using your body weight with your muscles to lift yourself up and down. And when you do that, you do things to strengthen your muscles. What happens when you're working out, you create these little tiny tears in your muscles, because you're obviously, if you're doing it to the point where you're not struggling or it's too easy, then you're not really using the proper resistance. It should be something that, you can't do 3,000 push-ups. If you're doing 3,000 push-ups, odds are you're not doing
to get somebody to sit on your back while you do though.
Or you're not doing it correctly, and with all resistance training, form is the number one priority. Not quantity, not weight. If you're doing the wrong form, you're not going to have it. You're more likely to cause harm or injury and not do any good. So form is definitely key. So when you're doing resistance training, like I said, it's going to be something that's going to wear on your muscles. And you want to push yourself, push yourself to the point of where you're fatigued and it's hard to keep going. You don't have to push yourself to muscle exhaustion where like you're ready to collapse, but that is a type of resistance training. And the harder you push your muscle, the more like tears and little things. And don't think, oh my God, I'm tearing up my muscles. What happens is that happens. And then when you sleep, your body repairs it and repairs it stronger. So that's the way it builds muscle. If you don't ever, get those little if you never do any slight damage to your muscles or whatever, where you're doing it to exhaustion or where it hurts, you're really not benefiting yourself.
Right. So, like I said earlier, back when I was in high school with the skating, we would skate back because ice hockey is basically a whole leg thing. You need the power in your legs. So we would skate up and down and back and forth and stop and go and ad nauseum. But you're right. As you got to the point where your legs were rubber and you basically had to stop, over time, the length of time you could go increased. So the amount of exercise we had to do, because you couldn't just skate back and forth 10,000 times, had to the exertion of the exercise had to increase.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, we had to do different things. But same thing, like you were saying, if you're just doing 3,000 push-ups and you're still not getting tired, you're not gaining.
Yeah.
You're not gaining.
And also, like a lot of times, like with hockey and stuff, a lot of that was probably more cardio too.
Oh yeah.
Where cardio is good in its own right, but But resistance training is something different. So if you're running every day, you're not doing resistance training.
No, exactly. Yeah.
So
lifting weights.
Yeah, like lifting weights. So like I had a friend of mine that I've known since I was a kid, and he was a runner. He'd run 5 miles a day or 10 miles a day, and he ate healthy, but he kept, just gaining weight and looking just softer and not looking. He's like, I don't understand what's going on. So even he went to his doctor, and his doctor's like, well, you're not doing any strength training,
Right.
And the body basically loses 1 to 3% of your strength every year naturally. It starts as early as in your 30s, and after you're 50, it really steps up. So if you're not doing things to build your muscle, you're actively losing muscle.
Now let's talk to the people that might be over 50. Not many, but there might be one or two listening. So the rate of muscle loss increases.
Correct.
But with resistance training, you can stall it, bring it back, reverse it. What can you do?
No, so with resistance training, you can actually build muscle. So you're actually building muscle back. It's not like once it's gone forever.
Right.
And in fact, like if you were, let's say, a bodybuilder and you used to be really fit, and then you took several years off, maybe you had an injury, and then you go back to, you lost a lot of muscle, and then you go back to training. Bodies have this thing called muscle memory. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you did have that strength and muscle, you're going to build it probably a lot quicker than somebody, who
never did it.
Who never did it or has been doing it, like if you've never done it and then you're starting, also newbies kind of build it a lot quicker. But then there's those people that, you resistance train every day. You're not going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger till you're the Hulk. Like, that's just not going to happen. I mean, there's going to come...
Without steroids.
Yeah. I mean, like most people think, and I think more women have this concern than men. Like, men aren't like, I don't want to look strong. But women are just scared they're going to get bulky or they'll get muscular looking. And you really don't... Like, as a female, you're never going to get that look naturally. Right. The women that look like that... do lots of things with all sorts of hormones and steroids to build boy bodies or, right. Make themselves more muscular. That's not a natural thing. And even most bodybuilders, they can't get that way naturally. Like if you look at natural bodybuilding versus, the power, like it's night and day with how these people look. And they have to do a lot of things, especially with bodybuilders, that aren't necessarily healthy for them to get themselves, to lose that much body fat and gain that much muscle and look as ripped as they do. And usually they just do that for a show, and then they'll go back to eating normal, so it's not this constant chiseled.
I've met people that do that.
Yeah.
They pig out on like spaghetti and stuff prior while they're working their brains out, and then afterwards they'll, after the show is over, and it's pizza and ice cream.
Yeah. And while they're training, they're going like partly doing all these things, and they might up cardio. And again,
yes,
there are certain things like cardio is good for. It's really good for quick weight loss, but it's not something you could sustain. So if you're doing it to prep for a show, that's great. But kind of like we talked about last episode, cardio as a means to be fit and healthy, as a way to lose weight long term, it's not going to, your body's just going to get used to that cardio level and just keep, changing its metabolic rate so that you're not losing more.
Right, and that brings up an interesting point because, for instance, I do a lot of outside work, so I'm in the sun and the heat and the blah, blah, blah. Well, over time, your body is used to that. So, you're thinking, well, I'm out there sweating all day long and working all day long, that you'd lose weight and you'd build up. Well, it doesn't work. Your body gets used to it.
Yeah.
And that's your natural rhythm. In order to break that natural rhythm, you have to do something else other than what you normally do.
Yeah. And the thing with, again, in the name progressive resistance training, progressive. So how do you progress?
Right.
So you want to start something like, if you're starting a resistance program, like people think, oh my God, I'm going to have to do all these hours and whatever. You could start anywhere from like 2 to 4 times a week. 2 times a week, if you put in like a good half an hour, you're going to see some benefits, But the things that you want to do are like compound movements, which basically means, if you're just going like this, you're just moving your bicep. Right. Where if you're doing a squat where you're starting, down low and you go up and you're moving compound muscles in your body. So the more muscles you're moving in an exercise, the more benefit you're getting. You're working multiple muscle groups, stuff like that. So if you're doing like, a squat or a press, there are all these different things, and you could just stick with those core exercises. But, that's what's going to build muscle stronger. And then the resistance, the progressive part. So if, let's say you start with, 10 reps. So repetitions is how many times you do that. Like how many times you do a squat. 1,
right.
2. And then let's say you do 10, and then aim for, you don't want to do 1,000. And if you can only do 1, then you're doing something. If you're doing your own body weight, you can only do 1. There's only, you work yourself up to 10. But once it starts getting where, you're doing so many repetitions, start adding weight. So at that point, that's how you're progressing. So if you used to just be able to do a squat with your own body weight, maybe now hold on to some dumbbells and go from like 5 pounds or whatever. So that's one way to progress. You progress the number of reps. You progress, the weights that you do, maybe the reps you do. Right. So, instead of 3 reps of 10, maybe you're doing 3 reps of 12, or maybe 4 reps of 10. You could play with those numbers and weights, and you could keep going and going and going. And kind of like I said, there's going to come a point in time, like you can't just, you're going to kind of max out at an area, like otherwise you have bodybuilders. If they always went up and up and up, they'd be like lifting 3,000 pounds, which is, at some point they just do that. And then they'll take time off and maybe change exercises or whatever. But that's what you're doing is you want to keep it going up and up. And that will show you that you're building muscle. So if 3 months ago, you could only do 3 reps of 10, and now you could do, 4 reps of 12, well, you just build muscle. It's obvious, and that can only happen through building your strength. Right. So that's a way you gauge, keep a journal, keep a diary, and you could go back and see where you were. And
the object here isn't necessarily to become a bodybuilder.
No.
The object here is just to maintain health.
Yeah.
And quality of life longevity.
Yeah, because like I said, you're losing muscle, whether you like it or not. So at minimal, you should at least want to maintain it or,
Sure.
increase it. Because the other thing is, with muscle, it's more metabolically active. So that what that means, it costs the body more calories to keep muscle on the body. So when you're sending the signal that you're strength training, that's how you raise your metabolism,
Right.
because even when you're not, building muscle, when you're just watching TV, if you have more muscle on your body, you're going to have a higher metabolism than somebody who does, with less
couch
muscle.
potato.
Yeah. Then if you have no muscle, keeping fat calories on your body doesn't require a whole lot of calories, so
Right.
they're going to have a very low metabolic rate. So it's a great way that if you want to eat more, increase your metabolism. And also, muscle is denser than fat. So, for example, like if you look at my size, and if I gained 10 pounds of muscle and lost 10 pounds of fat, I'd be smaller. Even though the weight on the scale would stay the same, I would not only look better, but I'd be smaller.
So we're not necessarily then using weight on a scale as a progress measurement.
No, it's not the best measurement. Like, even if you wanted, you could do fat calibers, which actual measure, your fat roll, or if you,
Right.
if you pinch an area, or even a tape measure.
Right.
Like your waist, your thighs, your arms. So for an example, like initially, if you lose fat and gain muscle, and if it's, 10 pounds for 10 pounds, you're going to be smaller. But at some point, let's say you're a guy and you do want to, not look so scrawny looking, and you can build more. On a female, it's a little bit more difficult to do that. It's just, we're not built for that. Like,
Right.
we don't have the physique or hormones of a guy. And like one of the things that, like these female bodybuilders do, not only steroids, but, testosterone or stuff. A female body doesn't naturally produce the hormones that inspire this massive muscle growth,
Right.
the way a man's body would. And believe
I
me,
don't like to brag or to-
no, but it takes a lot of work to, guys aren't going to all of a sudden start lifting a week and then be like, oh my God, you look like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Right. No, but that's not the goal.
No.
The goal is
Health. Yeah.
And what we're talking about today is a method to maintain muscle and be healthy.
Yeah.
Along with the diet and
Yeah.
and proper lifestyle.
Yeah. So building muscle helps with disposing your glucose. It keeps you more insulin sensitive as well, which are things that are healthy for everybody, And then, like I said, it helps your metabolic rate. I mean, unless you're one of those people that you want to try to live on as little calories as possible and just sit around and do nothing and not have, but I think most people enjoy food. And, you want to partake and not worry about like, oh my God, if I eat anything more than a handful of, of something
nuts.
that I'm going to gain, 3 pounds. And there are people that are like that. Like, if I just even look at something, I'm going to gain weight. And it's because you probably aren't maintaining a lot of muscle mass.
Right. Well, and I agree. And the stages that you go through, for instance, myself, with with my high glucose level and everything that I had. Fortunately, I don't have it anymore.
Yay!
But that I had. You go through the fasting and the diet change, and then suddenly your glucose is going down, and you actually lose weight in the process. But then there's a plateau, and then to move forward beyond the plateau, you have to bring in other things, such as the resistance training.
Yeah. And some other benefits with resistance training is it actually helps with bone density. So too, as you age, there's a lot of people that you think about osteoporosis what is it?
Osteoporosis. Yeah, osteoporosis.
Or arthritis, and you have all these things. But when you have more muscle, it helps with your bone density. So you're less likely to have falls and breaks and stuff like that. So again, that goes with that quality of life that we talked about earlier. It helps with all sorts of hormones. I mentioned testosterone. It also helps with that human growth hormone, which, again, people think growth like, oh, I'm going to be massive, but it helps with building like what stem cells and cell regeneration and stuff like that. You need growth hormone for that to, wound repair, things like that are all needed.
Yes.
So that's huge. Another big factor why, like when I first joined a gym, I weighed 107 pounds. I was fit. It wasn't anything to do with
107 pounds.
Yeah,
that's my left leg.
But it wasn't anything like I didn't have to lose weight or whatever. Like I did it to kind of reason to kind of get out of the house. But what I found is what most people it's for like mental health. Like when you exercise, it releases all sorts of endorphins and stuff like that. So I know now, like if I'm having a really bad day, if I go to the gym, I always feel better afterwards because so it does help with mental health, I think more than people realize, I mean, if it's, and again, if you go there and think you're punishing yourself, a lot of it is your mental attitude too. But like when I go to the gym, I'm like, wow, I'm so lucky that I lived in a first world country where I could go to some place that's just, there to help my health and improve my, my goals and extend my life. And I get to listen to whatever music I want and spend a half an hour here or 10, like this isn't a bad thing.
Right. Wow.
You know what I mean? I mean, I'm not in line at the dentist waiting to be drilled. I'm literally, you know what I mean? So I think you have to have the good mindset too. Like, look, you have the opportunity to take your life in your own hands and do something beneficial to your body and enjoy it,
Well, enjoy. I'm working on that part.
Yeah. But I mean, too, with strength training, it gives you that metabolic flexibility too, because, some people, it's hard for them to give up carbs, and if you go and lift weights and you do all these things that use up your carbs and glucose, you can have a lot of the benefit that a lower carb diet would do if you're actively using up all your carbs and then go into, autophagy at night because you've used up all your glycogen stores and stuff like that. So it has so many different benefits that are just amazing, And
is there a better time of day to work out?
There are studies as to, certain nuances, but I think the best time is the time you'll stick to it, honestly.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Because like I'm not a morning person. I'm not. So if I like force myself to do, you know what I mean? It's not something I'm going to enjoy. It's not something that I'm going to really have my full energy doing it. So I would gauge it around your lifestyle because it's really something that and the thing with that is the more you make it into your lifestyle routine, the better. So, like certain things like with brushing your teeth, people understand like, oh, okay, before I go to bed, I brush my teeth or whatever. So if you can incorporate it into something you're already doing, like, oh, I go grocery shopping on Thursdays, maybe you could hit the gym beforehand and then you'll go grocery shopping on the way back. And then all of a sudden it's part of your weekly routine.
And it's better to go grocery shopping feeling good than going hungry.
Yeah.
Well, hungry, you buy a cart of extra stuff.
But I know, like for me, like if I'm starving and like I get the worst time for me to go grocery shopping is if I'm starving and tired. And I mean tired by lack of sleep. Like if I go to the gym, I feel I'm tired from working out, but I feel like energized, like I did something really good for my body. And I'm less likely to pick up something terrible for me because I don't want to just undo what I just did. You know what I mean? I think that's a really bad mindset to get into. Some people reward themselves like, oh, I just killed myself with an hour at the gym. Let me have that pizza.
Yeah,
you know, if you're using food as a reward, then you have psychological problems.
Well, that's true.
No, and I think that's such a disservice that I think parents actually train their kids at an early age. Like, oh, you got an A.
Yeah, let's go
let's go get ice cream.
Right.
And you're really establishing terrible habits that can screw up this child later on in life, where they associate, food rewards, and then they use food as this like crutch, which, you should eat because you're hungry.
Right.
And you should eat foods that, strengthen your body and improve your health. And if it doesn't, why are you eating?
Right. Right. And I've noticed that since I've started my journey, is that the big difference between hunger and craving.
Yeah.
Just because you wake up in the morning and you're normally, or your afternoon or dinner, whatever, and you're normally hungry at 6 o'clock, and now you're on a fast or whatever, you're still around 6 o'clock in the beginning of a fast. Around 6, you're going to get what you think is hunger. It's really just craving that food that you're used to taking in at 6 o'clock. You're not actually hungry.
I think it's almost like, kind of like I was saying with the gym, like build it into routine. Mm-hmm. You've built a routine about eating at 6.
Right.
So it's as unconscious for you to think food at 6 as, like when you first get your license, it's the strenuous thing of,
right.
And now how many people drive to work and you don't even remember anything?
Right.
You couldn't even tell you, did I even hit a red light? You don't even know.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
And that's what it is. So you have to unprogram those, bad things that became part of your, unconscious, and build good habits into that, because you could use that as, for your benefit. I mean, most things during the day are done without your thought process. Like, you don't have to think about when to breathe oxygen. It just happens.
Right.
You don't think about if you feel hot to, pull your finger away. It just happens. So there's so many things in, our day-to-day lives that, initially required a lot of thought processes, but now it's just standard.
It's just every day.
So you want to incorporate good, healthy eating habits and good, strength training and healthy exercise into that same thing. So once it's habit, it's like brushing your teeth.
Right.
You'll notice, like, as a kid, when you're like, brush your teeth, they're like, oh, Mom, I don't want to do that. But, as an adult, if you don't brush your teeth, you're like it feels bad,
Fur growing on your teeth.
Yeah, like, oh, gross. So you want to get like that with, healthy foods and exercise, because like I've gotten out of the exercise kick because I had so many things going on with my life. And I'm not saying these are good excuses, but, I had 3 members of my family die, and it was moving, and it was a lot. And unfortunately, through time management, gym went by the wayside, like going to the gym. But it was hard because I love going to the gym, and it's like psychologically, it's upsetting to not go. So you want to be at that mind frame where it's, instead of it, most people are like, exercise, but you do get a point where you get hooked on it, And a lot of people, it's funny because, do you know who Dave Asprey is? You might not know.
No,
he came up with this whole bulletproof. Have you ever heard of bulletproof coffee or whatever?
No.
So he started this whole thing where you put like butter in coffee and whatever. Mm-hmm. But he writes all these books on coffee. Like, he's this coffee fanatic. He, coffee. So he says he gets a lot of flack where people are like, well, you're hooked on that. It's addictive. And he goes, well, a lot of people are addicted to exercise, because same thing. If I don't have coffee in a day, I'm like, like I'm missing it. But people get like that with exercise, and it's same thing. I mean, if you're going to have habits, it's better to enforce good ones versus bad ones, like having exercise as a habit that you miss isn't a bad thing. And like I said, like for strength training, I think people think like, oh my God, do I have 20 hours a week to devote to this? First of all, you shouldn't be doing strength training for that long, you know? You want to start slow, and even like twice a week at a half an hour is going to give you benefits. I mean, you could go longer if you want, or even if you, let's say you only have 15 minutes one day, it's better to take the 15 minutes and do it than do zero, you know?
Right.
I mean, I think so many people have this all or nothing attitude, and it's only harming yourself, and it's just keeping away from progress.
Right.
You know, and then they get down on themselves like, oh, I didn't do that. Or, you know, now they didn't go to the gym, and now all of a sudden that donut looks a little better because you're already feeling fat and worthless, you know? Mm-hmm. And
I call donuts fat pills.
But it is one of those things that it's like, it's just habits equals mindset, which equals, you know, health. Like, it's just, they all go hand in hand. And, you know, I think it's definitely one of those that, you know, it kind of needs to be, you know, incorporated. I think a lot of people, a lot of people think, oh, I could go to the gym. One thing I've heard a lot, like, you can't outwork a bad diet. You know, so like they say, abs are actually created in the kitchen. So it starts with food, but that extra 20% is in the gym, you know, like where you're going to get toned and definition and stuff like that. But when it comes to like longevity and quality of life, like I said, it's the thing across all diseases was muscle, you know, having muscle in your body. Because, you know, you can eat great, but if you don't have, like, even my dad who just passed, he was literally like skin on bones. And it wasn't attractive. Like, to just look and see bones and skin was
like a walking skeleton. Yeah.
You know, and it's one of those, and he kept saying like, oh, I don't have strength. And he's like, oh, let me sleep. And it's like, I was like, Dad, you need to, I mean, he was stubborn. If he wasn't so stubborn, it was one of those. But he used to have a physical therapist, which would, you know, come and do exercises. And the smallest amount of effort, he'd have these massive gains. And he just, you know, when his physical therapy session ended, he just didn't keep up with it. You know, they came for 6 weeks, and then week 7, he was like, I'll take a nap, you know? So you do have to take the initiative, but the body's so amazing that if you give it an inch, it'll give you a yard back. You know, it really, in the end, it wants to survive. So as long as you give it all the things that make it healthier and the building blocks, which just one, I guess, last note, because I know we're going to have to wrap things up. If you're doing strength training, the two things that you definitely need is enough protein, and think of what your ideal weight is. So if your ideal weight is like 150 pounds, eat like 150 grams of protein a day. And I mean like animal protein, because vegetable protein it's just not as bioavailable as animal protein. But you want to get enough animal protein, and you want to get enough sleep.
So because nice fish and things like that.
Yeah. So again, if you're, you know, the protein is the building blocks for muscle. So again, if you're building a house and you don't have wood and all you're giving it is cotton balls, this thing isn't going to stand. You know, you could be swinging away at cotton balls all you want. You're never going to have walls that stand. So you need that protein to build the muscle. And then you need the sleep, which is when muscle actually repairs itself.
Right.
So without adequate sleep, again, you're just going to run the risk of getting injured, or, you know, causing more harm than good.
Wasting away.
You know, you're going to keep tearing your muscles and never give it the time to repair. And the more, you know, regenerative sleep you get, the more aggressive you could be with, you know, maybe you want to go to the gym every day. You know, maybe you want to, you know, up it to every other day or something like that. But it's only going to help, honestly, you know. So
that's the beauty of it, and that's why we're here to be your best.
Yes. So definitely, it was fun. If you guys have any questions or, you know, but join us next week, and you know we'll help you be better until you are your best.
Until you're your best. So please, if you have and questions or whatever, put them in the comments. We do look at the comments, and Please like, share, subscribe, and help us build this to help not only you, but others.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you. See you next week.
Bye now.